Good morning. I'll call to order the regular meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee. Today is October 1st, 2015. I'm Lisa Bender. I chair the committee, and we have a quorum with Councilmember Goodman, Councilmember Andrew Johnson, and Council President Johnson. We have 7 items on today's agenda. We'll start with the consent agenda, and then we do have a discussion item, which we'll hear after the public hearings. So starting with consent item number 1, item number 4, vacation of part of an alley at Church of St. Albert the Great. This is approving an application to vacate the alley there for the church. Item number 5 is referring to staff and ordinance related to production and processing in amending the zoning definitions to include limiting production and processing. So staff will start that work. Item number 6 is referring to staff ordinances, amending Title 20 of the Code of Ordinances related to sign regulations. So I will move items 4, 5, and 6. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that carries. Just wanted to note that item number 7 under discussion is an update on the 1 to 4 unit residential development, and we'll hear that after the public hearing items. So under the public hearings, item number 1 is for an interim use permit for the Roots Birth Center, and we'll start with the staff presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Bender, council members. The first item on today's agenda is an interim use permit to allow for a birth center at 1901 44th Avenue North. The applicant is seeking the interim use permit in lieu of the conditional use permit to allow for the establishment of this new facility prior to, and then in the future she'll be making the application for the conditional use permit. An interim use permit is similar to a conditional use permit where staff and ultimately the city council has to make legal findings and find that the use will not create adverse offsite impacts and be compatible with the neighborhood. And you'll see in the staff report we have attached findings. The applicant is Rebecca Polston. She is a certified professional midwife, and she would be establishing 2 birth rooms within an existing building. A birth center is a place away from a residence where you would allow for a natural birth to occur in more of a home-like setting. That's not like a clinic or a hospital. So they have 2 birthing tubs that would be provided, and the floor plans are in the attached staff report. Staff is recommending approval of the interim use permit for up to the 5 years as requested, so that would take us to October 9th of 2020. There are some conditions of approval that we are asking the council to consider, and that is just based on some existing drainage issues. So where the applicant, its architect has indicated snow storage, we would instead ask for a landscaped area. There's only one exception to the zoning code, and through the interim use permit, they would not have to seek the variance at this time, but in the future, if the proposed layout is as such, just an off-street parking variance would be required as proposed. Right now, they have a 3-car detached garage that they would like to use for yoga space and prenatal classes. That essentially covers everything else was in the staff report, and I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? There are none. We've been joined by Councilmember Reich. So I'll open the public hearing on item number 1. Would anyone like to speak? Anyone like to speak on item 1? Last call. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. I will move. Council President.
Oh, Madam Chair, if you want to move approval, that'd be great, or I can. But I just really am pleased that Ms. Polston found what I think is a really nice building. We've been chatting for a while about her intention to locate in North Minneapolis, and she found a really nice building. So I'm really pleased she's going in there, and you know, a new business in my ward. I'm really happy about it. So it's a lovely building. It was a former dentist's office with apartment above and well-maintained building, and so it's a good spot.
Thank you, Council President. Any further discussion? So I'll move the item. Item number 1. My second baby was born in a birth center. I think they're really great community assets. Exciting. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that carries. Item number 2 is an interim use permit for Ramsey Excavating on Dowling Avenue North.
Good morning, council members. This also is an interim use permit, which I don't think we've had many for a while now. This morning you have 2 before you. This is an interim use permit by Ramsey Excavating for the property at 2 Dowling Avenue. This site is located in the I-3 General Industrial District. It's also located in the Mississippi River Overlay District, the Shoreland Overlay District, and the Floodplain Overlay District. It's located in the 4th Ward and in the Camden Industrial Area. The applicant is proposing to utilize the property for stockpiling aggregate products, staging equipment necessary to complete processing of those products, and then processing aggregate products for hauling away aggregate products. And the zoning code defines this as a concrete, asphalt, and rock crushing facility. The applicant is requesting to do this until December 31st of 2017. The site is located just north of Dowling Avenue, between First Street North and the Mississippi River. It's located in what has historically been the Upper Harbor Terminal site. Just for a visual of where the Upper Harbor Terminal site is, it's a large piece of land that the city of Minneapolis owns. The terminal has closed. The property highlighted in orange is the property where the applicant is proposing to do the work. All of the other properties that have numbers on it are also other pieces of land associated with the Upper Harbor Terminal site, and the applicant is only proposing to utilize that northernmost property. CPAD in the city has been working with the Park Board for a redevelopment strategy of all 50 acres associated with the Upper Harbor Terminal site. The future land use for this is not going to be industrial. As guided in the Above the Falls Master Plan update, the future land use for the site is both parks and open space, and then also mixed use. CPAD is recommending approval of the interim use permit to allow the crushing facility on this site. However, we are recommending that the expiration date occur on October 9th, 2016, which would be 1 year from the date of the City Council action following today's meeting. CPAD does find that the use is in conformance with the findings for a conditional use permit, as the use will sunset. The crushing part of the business would be introduced to the site through this application. Historically, the site has been used to store large piles of raw materials on the site that has arrived by barges. And so that aspect of the use would continue. I'll show you some pictures. They're not the prettiest pictures, but this is what the site looks like today. And this historically has been what the site has looked like. It's been used to store fertilizer and sand and gravel and all kinds of other raw materials. But the crushing part, as I said, is what would be introduced to the site through this use. And while that is the case, the Minneapolis Health Department, Environmental Services Division, and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency will have oversight on this use. To lessen the impact of the crushing aspect of the use, we are recommending 9 conditions of approval as part of this interim use permit related to dust, erosion control, and noise. The site is surrounded by industrial properties, and while it's located next to the Mississippi River, the uses across the river are also industrial in nature. The one aspect that this use is not meeting in the zoning code would be landscaping and screening. When you have outdoor storage, which is allowed in the I-3, you would be required to screen those stockpiles from public streets. In this case, the screening would be required along Dowling Avenue, which is on the south side of the property, and then First Street North. Given that the future for this site is not industrial, it's going to be parks and open space or mixed use, as I had indicated, we're recommending that you waive those requirements for the landscaping and screening. Inevitably, it would most likely be removed for the future use or redevelopment of the site. So as I had mentioned, we are recommending approval, and I'm going to just highlight the 9 conditions so you can hear them. We are recommending that it expire on October 9th of 2016. The applicant shall comply with prevent dust in compliance with Minneapolis Ordinance Chapter 47. Water or other appropriate methods must be used for dust suppression during site activities. Erosion must be in compliance with Chapter 52, erosion cement control for land disturbance. Noise must be in compliance with City Ordinance Chapter 389, and the hours of operation shall be limited to those by City Ordinance, which is Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., not including federal holidays. We are requesting that you do not authorize, or the city not authorize, any after-hours work permits for this site, and that a temporary sign shall be placed on the site indicating who is doing the activities in case there are issues raised by surrounding property owners. So that is the application. Again, we're recommending approval of this for 1 year.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Okay, there are none. We'll open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to speak? As we have one person signed in. So whoever would like to speak, just come on up. No one? Anyone like to speak? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Council President?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move the staff recommendation, and I really want to make it clear this is an interim use, a true interim use. We have plans for the Upper Harbor. I appreciate staff working on this. It's important as we transition out of this industrial use that we actually have some dollars to cover our costs of maintaining and the property while we wait for the transition. Just had a meeting with the Park Board last week, Park Board leadership, to talk about moving forward on the Upper Harbor Terminal. And it's been interesting to see the interest that's being generated in the potential there with all that acreage along the Mississippi River. I think we're finally hitting people's sweet spot about finding out exactly what's available there. It looks harsh right now, but again, it's a temporary use, and I'm supporting this today.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. And that carries. All right, item number 3 is a conditional use permit and other applications for 4264 Upton Avenue South.
Morning, Chair Bender and council members. My name is Mei Ling Smith, and I'm here to present 2 appeals today of the Planning Commission's decision to approve the land use applications for the proposed 4-story mixed-use building at 4264 Upton Avenue South. It's located in the C1 zoning district and Linden Hills Overlay District. I'll start by showing you the project that was presented to the Planning Commission, and then go over the Planning Commission's conditions of approval and also the appeals of the Planning Commission's decisions. The site contains 1 parcel at the corner of West 43rd Street and Upton Avenue South. There's a mix of commercial uses in this area, also multifamily housing, single-family housing, a library, and Lake Harriet. There's a 1-story commercial building directly to the west and south of the property lines on the subject site, and also a 2-story office building and parking lot directly to the north. Here's some photos of the existing site. This is a vacant 1-story commercial building that most recently held Famous Dave's and was previously a gas station. Here is a rendering of the proposed 4-story building that would have ground level retail and 3 levels of apartments above. In total, there would be 29 dwelling units and 50 parking spaces provided within the building. The parking areas would be accessed through 1 curb cut off of Upton Avenue South. So on the east elevation on the top, you can see the garage access on the far right. And so all of the business entrances would be located on this east facade. On the south elevation, there would be the residential entrance, and this is facing 43rd Street. The west and north elevations face mostly commercial property, but the first 24 feet of the west elevation is adjacent to the R1 district. A conditional use permit is required to increase the maximum building height from 3 stories or 42 feet to 4 stories, 55 feet, 11 inches at its tallest point. And this area contains an elevator and elevator overrun. The rest of the building is primarily 53 feet 8 inches and does not include the 8-inch to 10-inch parapet. As I mentioned, the surrounding area does contain a range of different types of uses and building heights. So there are a range of building heights between 1 and 7 stories in this area. The zoning code measures building height based on the adjacent grade rather than the actual height above sea elevation. So because of the topography of the area, the proposed 4-story building would actually be situated at a natural grade that is lower than many buildings in the immediate vicinity, as shown in the cross-section. This shadow study compares the shadowing of the proposed development to that of a 3-story building, which is shown on the far left. Due to the massing and the fourth floor step backs of the proposed building, there is little difference in shadowing impacts between a 42-foot building that would be permitted by right in this district and the proposed 55-foot 11-inch proposal. Finding number 5 of the conditional use permit requires that the project be in compliance with the adopted comprehensive plan and adopted policies. This site is located in a neighborhood commercial node shown in the orange boundaries, and the future land use map identifies the site as mixed use. The green parcels are within the Linden Hills Small Area Plan, which was adopted by the City Council in 2013. So this is direct language from the Small Area Plan that addresses height and how that should be addressed. Both the comprehensive plan and Small Area Plan state that neighborhood commercial nodes and mixed use areas are appropriate areas for commercial uses and medium to high density residential development. The adopted small area plan states that a maximum height of 3 or 4 stories is allowed for multifamily residential and mixed-use buildings within the 3 neighborhood commercial nodes. It also provides additional policy guidance to assist with transitions between the building and adjacent public and private spaces. The small area plan does call for floor-to-floor heights that are shorter than the zoning code maximums of 20 feet for the first story and 14 feet for every floor above the first floor. And so in this proposed development, the first floor would be 19 feet in height, while floors 2 through 4 would be between 11 and 12 feet in height. Staff has encouraged the applicant to reduce the height of the floor below 19 feet. And the 4th story of the proposed project would be stepped back at least 10 feet from both street-facing facades and residential districts to minimize shadowing on adjacent streets as in compliance with the small area plan. The applicant is requesting variances to reduce the south and west side yard setbacks, and there's a minimum yard requirement of 11 feet adjacent to the C1 zoning district and 12 feet adjacent to the R1 district. Here are some of the floor plans demonstrating those variance requests. So for the first 24 feet away from the north property line, that is adjacent to R1, and that requires a 12-foot step back, and the proposed plan for the Planning Commission showed a 10-foot setback on the first floor. Here are the second floor setbacks, variance requests, I'm sorry. Third floor, so this is a combination of building wall and patios exceeding 50 feet, which exceeds what's allowed as a permitted encroachment. And the 4th floor as proposed. And there would be nothing on the roof except for some mechanical equipment. Site plan review is also required, and it was approved by the Planning Commission on September 8th. So as I mentioned, the Planning Commission approved the proposed development 4-2. For the conditional use permit, they added 2 conditions. To compare the proposed development before you today against some of the previous proposals for this site from a different developer, this one is only 1 parcel, whereas the other ones were between 2 and 5 parcels. And the commercial space is about the same as the previous 2. The GFA overall is smaller than the previous one, so there are different metrics you can gauge the size for this current proposal. So some updates that have been made by the applicant and sent to me since the Planning Commission's approval on September 8th. The 4th floor was stepped back from the 3rd floor building wall by at least 10 feet on the west side. So that applies to, so the Planning Commission made this condition apply to this portion of the building. And so new version does comply with that condition. The Planning Commission also asked for, this is the rendering of how that would look, and they changed the color scheme to go back to a darker color scheme on the right. And that shows the fourth floor step back adjacent to residential. And then also the Planning Commission required to add more brick on the corner of 43rd and Upton and lighten the color palette, and also add a third floor cornice so you can see the changes on the right. And this is just kind of how it looks overall. So today you're considering 2 appeals. The first one is from the concerned residents of Linden Hills, represented by Constance Pepin, and the second group is Larry Levercum and others. So the first appeal discusses the ways in which the findings for all requested land use applications were not met, and the appellant has submitted additional material that can be found in your electronic copies today. And then the second one is based on the architectural design of the building. Since the Planning Commission meeting, the applicant has met with the second appellant to discuss some possible changes. So I just wanted to share with you what some of these changes are that they discussed. Overall, changing the color palette a little bit. And here are the elevations to go with that. That concludes my portion of the presentation. The appellants are here to speak as well as the applicant, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, there aren't any. So we'll open the public hearing. Why don't we start with the applicant and then the 2 appellants?
Excuse me, is there any way the volume could be turned up a little bit? I've got a really bad cold and I'm having trouble hearing.
Excuse me. Good morning, committee members. I'm Carol Lansing, Faegre Baker Daniels, representing the applicant. Our team here today is Clark Gasson and Jake Schaefer, who are the owners and developers, and Jesse Hamer, the architect. I want to address the history of the small area plan. Jesse will talk to you about the design and the changes that have been made, and Clark will finish our presentation. One of the appellant groups asserts that due process was violated in adoption of the small area plan, and that to get to guidance that allows 4 stories, and others continue to insist that the plan actually does only allow 4 stories. Neither position is accurate, and I think because of those arguments, it would be helpful to review what the history of adoption of the small area plan was. The original draft, I don't know if this can come up, the original draft of the plan that came out of the steering committee did limit height in the commercial nodes to 3 stories. But the Planning Commission response to that draft guideline after the public review period was that additional height should be allowed to accommodate a 4th story in keeping with policies of the comprehensive plan. And this history is also outlined in a memo that Brian Schaefer did at the time of the City Council adoption of the small area plan. In response to those Planning Commission comments, the draft of the plan that went to public hearing before the Planning Commission was changed to establish a maximum height of 44 feet, but 3 or 4 stories are allowed within that maximum height. So they did say 3 or 4 stories, but they also had guidance that would have limited height to 44 feet, even though a 44-story building under zoning code regulations can be up to 56 feet. The Planning Commission response to that recommendation expressed concerns about this inconsistency of how height is measured citywide and under the zoning code, and also didn't feel that 44 feet was really a feasible height limit for a 4-story building. After the Planning Commission hearing, which was a public hearing, the plan went to the Zoning and Planning Committee, and based on the recommendations of planning commissions and others, The recommendation that the Zoning and Planning Committee forwarded to the City Council removed the height limit of 44 feet. It did also encourage, though, that 3- and 4-story buildings try to be less than the maximum allowed, in this case for a 4-story building, less than 46 feet. And that is the language that was adopted. This was a very thorough and thoughtful planning process with lots of opportunity for comment and public input. It was not any violation of due process. It's also been argued that the guidance only allows 4-story buildings in a C2 district, and that the guidance for C1 remains 3 stories. Well, that type of guidance would be meaningless. Those are the maximum heights allowed in those zoning districts. All zoning districts allow an opportunity for a conditional use permit to increase height, and this guidance says that where appropriate, 4 stories, or in this commercial node, 4 stories can be appropriate. But the plan also requires step backs at the upper levels, and Jesse will go into how this design meets all the guidance of the small area plan. Just wanted to note that Mei Ling was adamant throughout this process that the project meet that guidance. And no questions for me, I will let Jesse take over.
Good morning. My name is Jesse Hamer. I'm with Momentum Design Group, the architect for the project. I'd like to provide a brief summary of where the design is at and a little bit about how we got there. To start off with, I was also the architect for the previously approved project brought to the city a year ago. And so I've sort of laid out a quick comparison between the two buildings. We are both a 4-story building, both our project and the previously approved one. We are 53 feet 8 inches as the primary roof height. The prior project was 55 feet 10 inches. We're one lot, just the Famous Dave's lot. The prior project had 2 lots, and they were that included the office space to the north there. So our lot now ends here, and then this was the other lot that was previously used. The developer decided that the building was too large previously, wanted a smaller, shorter building than we had previously. We have roughly 53,590 square feet above grade floor area versus the previous project was 60,870 square feet of floor area. One of the biggest differences between the two projects, however, is actually in how we treated the pocket park. So that's the current proposal. We extended the pocket park considerably along the Upton Avenue side. The previous project had limited to just at the corner, and was only for the intent was to replace what had already been there as part of his agreement with the neighborhood. We are currently showing that same design being replaced, as this is part of the previous agreements that we've sort of taken on as the new developer. But we're hoping to work with and have plans to work with the neighborhood to come up with a new design here that would really take advantage of the additional space that we've given. Unlike the previous project, we've set back on the north side and the west side of that pocket park 2 feet and 4 feet to give us some room to work with in a new plan that we're hoping to agree to with the neighborhood. We've also set back from the sidewalks on both the 43rd and Upton sides to give a little bit more room to the sidewalk, a little more space there for the pedestrians. This was the initial design that we presented to the neighborhood back in May, and it was not received warmly at first. We had a lot of feedback and a lot of discussions, both with the neighborhood as well as with Mei Ling and the staff, and working with the small area plan to keep it within the intent of the small area plan. So those changes occurred over the course of the summer, back and forth, and such that by the end of the summer, we have this design, which was presented to the Planning Commission. As you can see, we eliminated the very large overhangs. We broke up monolithic planar elements. Worked with the staff, we got our full 10-foot setbacks on the 4th floor on the street-facing facades. We also changed the stone material, which had previously been proposed, to a brick which matched the neighboring buildings in the neighborhood to better fit into the neighborhood. After the Planning Commission approval, we continued to work with staff on changes based on the conditions of the Planning Commission. And so those changes resulted in a setback on the, let's see if I can get it on there, a setback on the 4th story on the west side, which Mei Ling pointed out in her presentation here. Previously, it had matched the 3rd floor, so it looked like this. But we stepped that back. We had to eliminate a unit to get it. We had to reduce our unit count from 29 to 28 to make that work. But we made those changes, as well as the changes to the corner. Right, brought us to this point here. So we added the additional brick on the corner around the pocket park, eliminating what was previously glass and curtain wall. And then we introduced an art panel, this element here, to also give a little bit more, just add something interesting and fun to that corner. We met with representatives from the neighborhood just this week, Larry and some other representatives with him, and just to discuss what we could do to incorporate some of the neighborhood's desires into the building. We talked a great deal about the materials of the building, the color of the building. They wanted looking for a warmer and softer color palette. So we did change the metal to a dark bronze color, previously the black metal. We changed that to dark bronze. We changed the dark gray stucco to a warmer brown, and then changed the brick color to be a little more rosier than what we previously had. It's a little bit tough to see. I don't know, hopefully on your screen you can tell the difference. But previously we had the dark black curtain wall and metal panel accents, and then more of a yellow brick. And then now we're proposing something that's a little rosier in color and warmer. We shared these changes with the representatives that we had met with, and they received them warmly. One other thing that's been talked a little bit about is the height of the 1st floor. And I'd like to share this diagram to kind of show where we're getting these numbers from, where that height is being generated. So we have a 19 feet floor-to-floor height. But because of the overhangs and the cantilevering that we have to do with the concrete construction, we actually end up with some fairly deep structural elements that we have to have clearances around. We need both, because we have units above a retail, we also have to have a fairly hefty sound acoustic treatment in there that needs to work, as well as clearance for both ductwork and lighting and all that sort of thing, and maintain what the developer has requested from us is a 14-foot floor-to-floor, or ceiling height, 14-foot clear ceiling height, which is a typical retail ceiling height, just for the flexibility of his leasing. I would like to point out that the actual perceived height is probably closer to 15 feet rather than the full 19. And that's because it's 15 feet to the bottom side of those overhangs, which is really, if you look at this image, that's the bottom of our brick elements on the 2nd level there. All right, so that perceived height is only 15 feet, not a full 19. If you have any questions, I'm certainly available to answer them. But otherwise, I think that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. I don't see any questions.
Thanks, Jesse. My name's Clark Gasson. I live at 3337 El Dorado Trail. I've developed some very high-profile developments in our city, like historic Florence Court, the Edgewater on Lake Calhoun, and the Walkway. I want to thank everyone from the city staff, my development team, and especially the neighborhood for pushing our design team to create a world-class building that complements the Linden Hills neighborhood. Before we purchased this property, my ownership group really did our due diligence on the history of the site and really understood past approvals from the city on the site. We truly wanted to respect all parties involved and really concentrate on the following areas. We studied past approvals from the previous developer to make sure our project was shorter in height and not as big, so we decided not to purchase the adjacent property. And by doing this, we're only developing the Famous Dave site. Again, the other approved projects on the site had more parcels included, and we do not. Our project is not that large. We also felt it was important to create more usable pocket park by not building right up to the property line and extending the pocket park by over 50%, where the previous project did not do this. Create a better pedestrian feel, as we are not building our building all the way up to our property line on Upton or 43rd. This will give a more generous sidewalk and walking experience. And we also removed the curb cut on 43rd Street. We're also including community public parking in our project on the first floor. To be very clear, the project we are talking about today is shorter and much smaller in size and massing, as we didn't purchase the adjacent property from past approvals from the city. During our first talks with the city about our development, they made it very clear we needed to follow the small area plan, and including my legal team, we believe this development is doing that. At the Planning Commission, we were asked to set back the west side of our fourth floor, and by doing this, we lost an apartment unit. This really had a negative effect on our underwriting, and this request isn't consistent with the small area plan, so I'm asking for reconsideration of this unit, and in return, we are willing to lower our retail 1 foot. In the past week, we've had great conversations with one of the groups here today appealing our project, and we believe after these conversations, they truly understand the project better, and we want to continue these talks by having additional meetings on the pocket park, building material, and color selections. Our development team cares. We want to do the right thing, and I think my past work in our city has proven that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any questions? So now I think we'll move through the appeals in the order they're listed here. So why don't we start with Ms. Pepin?
Morning, my name's Stanford Hill. I'm with the Bassford Remley Law Firm here in town. The concerned citizens hired me to open the presentation for them. And essentially, they asked me to do a 30,000-foot flyover of their position, their opposition to this project, and then to speak specifically about the small neighborhood plan and its impact on this project. In that regard, I would commend to you some of the presentations or the written submissions that the concerned citizens have filed. In particular, a letter from Pat Smith. Mr. Smith goes through the requirements for the CUP for this project and discusses each requirement that you as a panel have to decide on, and discusses why this project does not comply with the requirements for the CUP. The pictures that the architect put up are beautiful building, but the question is that building consistent with the height and scale and type of neighborhood that we're dealing with here? And in that regard, the concerned citizens want the panel to be assured that we are in favor of development, but that development that is consistent with the scale and character of this neighborhood. So again, Mr. Smith goes through and details each of the qualifications for a CUP and discusses why this project does not meet those qualifications. Mr. Pitt, who's going to speak after me, submitted a lengthy document to you where he does a side-by-side analysis of the staff report and all of the conclusions and assumptions that the staff made in coming out in favor of this project. There are a lot of improper assumptions made. There are, for instance, the statement made this morning that there are 7-story buildings in the neighborhood. Again, we are talking about a C1 commercial node here. And the 7-story building that the staff is referring to is in a different zoning district and blocks away from this project. As CPED noticed or mentioned or found during its analysis, 20 of the 22 buildings in the surrounding neighborhood to this proposed project are 1 to 1.5 and 2 stories in height. In particular, Mr. Pitt discusses the shadowing study. And shows 2 slides side by side of unacceptable 3-story structure and the proposed 4-story structure. Obviously, the difference in shadows between a 3rd and a 4th story are at the end of the shadow. And the finding you have to make is, what is the impact of that difference in shadow length? That simply can't be determined when the end of the shadow is off of the slides, for both slides. So what the city staff was left to do, and what you are left to do based on this shadow study, is to assume the difference between the 3- and 4-story buildings. And the city staff went on and made the assumption that the difference in those 2 shadow studies would not be that significant. That's an insufficient basis for a factual determination that the shadow effect of this 4-story building would not impact the surrounding neighborhoods on that basis alone, because all findings must be in favor of the CUP. The CUP should be denied. Mr. Pitt's entire presentation goes through the city council or the city planner's recommendations and discusses all of the factual conclusions and assumptions that are improper. Ms. Pepin, who will also speak after me, has submitted for your consideration what I would consider as a lawyer approaching a legal brief. And she does an in-depth analysis of all of the requirements of the CUP, all of the requirements under the city ordinance that you have to find, and all of the requirements for the 2 variances for this project, and argues persuasively that the conditions are not met. Finally, I would submit that the findings of fact and recommendation that was issued by this panel in connection with the previous project are persuasive on the issue of height. Yes, that project was for a larger mass, but the height was almost identical to this project, and the eventual report and recommendation was that the CUP for that property be denied because of the height. The only thing that has changed in the interim is the small area plan, and that's what they asked me to speak about. Because the suggestion taken directly from the plan that the neighborhood and the concerned citizens support a 4-story building on this site for this project is simply wrong. The small neighborhood plan, the genesis for that plan was the previous 56-foot project. After approval for that was turned down, the concerned neighbors went to their elected representatives and said, what can we do to make sure that we aren't standing here today opposing a project of identical height? We put a lot of time and man hours into opposing the project because of height, and we don't want to be in the same position down the road. And it's suggested to us, to the concerned citizens, do a small neighborhood plan. Set forth your goals and visions for that neighborhood, for that unique commercial node known as Linden Hills. And if that's adopted by the city council, that becomes part of the government fabric for how future development will take place at this site in that C1 commercial node. And CPED, in its overview of the building and small area plan process, makes numerous references to the fact that the neighborhood's overriding concern was height. In a pedestrian-friendly commercial node where the majority of the buildings are 1 to 2 stories in height, a 4-story building of 56 feet is more than twice as tall as the nearest building. It's completely out of character. And it's exactly what the community did not want when they drafted the small neighborhood plan. And it wasn't until after the public comment period when they were told by their council person that the city attorney has opined that having height limits in small neighborhood plans is not acceptable. And because it's unenforceable, it has to be removed from the plan. One of the things I did after being retained is try to find legal support for that position, that small neighborhood plans cannot contain height limitations. I was not able to find any. But in any event, it wasn't until after the neighborhood had spent $60,000 and 16 months creating a plan to limit height. And again, it was based upon the previous project's height that they did this whole process, that suddenly they were told that the height restriction had to be removed. And for the small neighborhood plan now to be turned on its head and used against the neighborhood to say, well, we're only giving you what you wanted with this plan, is to subvert that process. I'm going to turn the podium over to the other speakers, but again, I commend their materials to you. This project does not meet all the requirements for the CUP. It does not meet all the requirements for the proposed variances, and the appeal should be granted.
Okay, thank you. So we have a second appeal. Could one representative from the second appeal please come on up and speak? And then I'll move through the list of people who have signed in.
I think there were additional speakers hoping to speak on the first appeal.
We have additional speakers. We've signed it.
I suppose we could handle each appeal separately. It seems a little. Yeah. So for the additional speakers, each person will have 2 minutes. If people feel they can separate themselves into each different appeal, and then I guess we'll have anyone who isn't here to speak on one of the specific appeals at the end.
Madam Chair, just in the interest of clarity, because it sounds like there's not clarity, I think you were doing a good thing by trying to have the main speaker for each appeal speak first and then have all of the testimony. But I understand there's confusion about that now. So you're moving in just to be clear, you're moving in the direction of the first appeal. The primary speaker spoke. Every additional speaker can speak for 2 minutes. Then we'll move to the second appeal. I think your way was better, but I understand what now seems to be happening.
If I may. I'm not screaming. It's fine with me if you go ahead.
Thank you.
All right. So each additional speaker who's speaking to the points in the first appeal has 2 minutes, and Councilmember Johnson will be timing you.
Okay, I'm going to have to talk really fast. My name is Constance Pepin, and I do need to take a couple seconds and clarify that my appeal group was not represented in any discussions, although we did try to communicate with the developer before the appeals. So the whole concept of communicating with the neighborhood, I think, needs to come through our city council member in order to be valid going forward. This is Linden Hills. Please grant the appeal. The reasons to deny the project are many, and I don't have time to go into all of them. But the speaker before me did a very good job, and I do hope you read the memo because it does show that basically it doesn't meet the required criteria, and it does not comply, in fact, with the Minneapolis plan. It also effectively rezones the area. So a few ways that it doesn't meet, and there are many more. It's injurious, it's not consistent with the applicable port policies, it blocks access to light and air, it shadows, and it's out of scale and character. This is Linden Hills, in case you haven't been there lately. Here's another picture. Notice the two-story buildings. Look at this. This is very injurious. This is what the neighbor behind the building will see from his backyard. In fact, the building on the right is the one-story building that it completely swallows up. This is injurious. Please note the building on the left, the one-story building that is all but obliterated by this building. Please note the building on the right, the two-story building, which again is all but obliterated by this out-of-scale, out-of-character building, out of character. Very injurious towers above properties. The design and materials are completely out of scale and character. And again, it effectively upzones C1 node to C2 illegally. Here's more pictures of Linden Hills. This is how it really looks. This is how it really looks. This is how it shouldn't look. This is out of character. This is out of scale completely. This is not consistent with the TMP, which says you preserve the stability and diversity of the city's neighborhoods and support the continued presence of small-scale neighborhoods serving retail and commercial services. All these land use policies that were stated as being compliant, it's not. The small area plan says that we want to preserve the small-scale buildings characterized by modest width and height. The vision that you've seen, keep and enhance what makes the neighborhood, the commercial districts unique, ensure appropriately scaled development, renovation and new development support and enhance the existing scale and character of the neighborhood. It's not consistent with the LSAP. It doesn't match the vision goals. It ignores guidance for transition and setbacks. It does the 3 or 4 stories spin that is going to be talked about even more in the future. And there's a bias on the Planning Commission and on your committee that Linden Hills won't be satisfied with anything, and that is not true. Here's a building that was approved with no voice or no opposition or complaint at all from the neighborhood for the same identical site. This building was approved with no problems from the neighborhood. So it's not true. And I know that some of you have a bias that, you've been at this so long that you're not going to be satisfied with anything. We will be. And the next picture shows how I'm feeling right now. It's a personal note about this is how I feel that city government looks like to me.
Thank you.
We are not lawyers. We are a highly engaged community in support of appropriate development. Our preference is abundantly clear for the C1 node permitted 3-story 42 maximum. We spent $60,000 on a small area plan. Most of the participants said that we wanted it to stay at 3 stories. Please grant the appeal.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. If anyone else would like to speak on the first appeal, please come up, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Will Pitt, 3804 Upton Avenue South. I'd like to say that the Planning Commission has erred in its approval of the conditional use permit because the cut will be injurious to the use and enjoyment of the surrounding properties. The staff's false standard of injury and enjoyment as being the residence distance of 70 feet away from a shared property line is not the legal standard for the use and enjoyment of one's property. We have provided evidence that the properties adjacent to the building are in use and being enjoyed. And here is, just so you can see, these are, I don't know, it's a little dark, but there you can see the adjacent properties. Right there, those are the adjacent properties. 2-story, a single family residence, 1-story coffee shop, 2-story office building. These are the pictures of the use of the property most immediately adjacent. And within this fall 70-foot standard, there are solar lighting, there is dedicated dining and cooking areas, there's work play, and privacy issues. This picture right here shows, actually, that's the bedroom of the resident. This is a shed, a working shed that's in in the 70 feet. You can see the back of it. There's ladders, there's things like that. So that's the residence. There's also more pictures, and I'll show you there's flowers, there's edible plants in that yard. There's bird houses, and there's gardening that goes up to the fence line, which is the property line right here. The Planning Commission has also erred in granting the approval of the variances because the circumstance of the 4 stories on which all the calculations are based was created by the applicant, who has an interest in the property and who does not meet the legal standard of practical difficulty. The variances are only needed because the applicant has chosen to exceed the maximum allowed height permitted of 3 stories in the C1 site by choosing to apply for 4 stories. The 3-story maximum allowed height permitted in the C1 is compliant with the density goals of the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth. 3 stories is compliant with these issues of the TMP, and that's stated by Brian Schaefer, the CPED manager of Linden Hill Small Area Plan, in the Linden Hill Small Area Plan briefing on key content issues by Brian Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Pitt.
What?
Can you finish up? The time is up.
No. The regulatory recent, did 2 minutes gone by already?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm almost done and I have
Final
something
thought,
prepared.
please.
I won't be that long. The regulatory on recent project-based context regarding building heights says here, the regulatory framework and recent building examples indicate that desired levels of density are achievable at 3 stories. It also has pictures of those buildings, and it says the CPED project manager had concerns over the building height in this draft of the plan, but ultimately the recommendation was consistent with the policies of the TMP, albeit not fully consistent with CPED's interpretations of those policies.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Pitt.
No, I have a couple things more to do.
The next speaker.
I
can come
feel
on
that
up.
there is an appearance of conflict of interest and previous bias of the 2 zoning and planning committee members. I would like to remind you that you are bound to vote based on the directives of the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth and the zoning ordinances and not your opinions in this matter. Lisa Goodman has prior bias. In a article on November 27, 2013, she stated, you're going to see changes in the neighborhoods are going to need to focus on development. You're talking 4 stories per building where there is one. That's a prior bias. Also, there were campaign contributions to Lisa
Sir,
Goodman from
your
Fagri
time
and
is up.
Benson, and 2, as well as to Lisa Bender, and 2 of those people who gave money to their contribution, are Wynn Rockwell and Nick Peregrino, who both now sit on the Planning Commission with Lisa Bender. And actually, Wynn Rockwell doesn't, but his son does. So that's also a conflict of interest.
We've been extremely
Fagri and
patient with your
Baker
testimony,
Daniels is
and you're not
represented by
even
Carol
speaking
Lansing, also
to
who
the-
works in that building. The
to the
last thing I would like to
applications that are
say
in
to
front of
wrap
us
up
or the
is,
appeal.
I'd like to say, the purpose of the Linden Hill Small Area Plan creates a framework for residents to influence neighborhood improvement or development projects. That is the purpose of the Small Area Plan. Heights or 3 stories are allowed in Linden Hills. We've had a lot about this from this council and from other councils about the 3 or 4 stories are allowed in Linden Hills. That's a saying that 30 or 55 miles per hour are allowed in the city of Minneapolis. Every licensed driver knows that you can't go 55 miles per hour on a 30 mile per hour residential street because we have speed limits. In Linden Hills, we have zoning regulations, or at least we do up to now. And in closing, I would like to say that I've been here since the beginning, and we started the small area plan to protect our neighborhood. We paid $60,000 for that small area plan, and in the end, now we're sitting here and you've told us that you've sold us a coat that will not protect us from the cold. So that's it. Thank you for your time.
Next speaker for the first appeal, please come on up and state your name and address for the record. Really ask that people respect our time and stick to the 2 minutes, and please try not to repeat what has already been said, and to please keep your remarks germane to the appeal in front of us.
My name is Kristen Tombers. I'm at 4307 Upton Avenue South. That's Clancy's Meats. I've been up here several times. Want y'all to know several people thanked me and all of us who keep coming down here for these appeals. A lot of people can't be here for these. The message I guess I want y'all to know is that there are a lot of people that find this disconnect staggering. Almost 500 signatures have been signed for this time around on a petition, well over 2,000 last time with one of the other developments that was out of scale, out of character. Neighbors don't want this four-story. The building simply does not fit. C1 zone does not allow this four-story. It didn't anyway before the language was changed. The small area plan did say no height at this 50, whatever it is. Clearly, the four-story and the character of that building does not fit at that intersection. To reiterate a well-used phrase, and one that was used by a Michigan congresswoman in the Planned Parenthood hearings just recently, saying that something is true over and over and over again doesn't make it true. 4 stories does not fit on that corner. I wish if it would be better, I think, for all of us, if you would just admit that you know that, but that you're going to do it anyway. Because I think we all know that that height and that character does not fit that corner. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on the first appeal? Please come up, state your name and address for the record.
Good morning, members of the Minneapolis City Council. My name is Bob Roscoe. My address is 1401 East River Parkway, Minneapolis, and I support the appeal. I'm a strong advocate of increased density when it is appropriate, but not density at all costs. The proposed height restrictions of the neighborhood residential character, I think, is being abrogated by this proposal. These setting back the upper stories is a useful tool in architecture design and dealing with density, but it does not work in this case. The small area plan, as other speakers said, was really not followed. But I think another concern here is that I have been involved in coming to these council meetings before most of you were on the council from the early 1970s, and I'm concerned about neighborhoods. A lot of my work is involved with them. In the 70s, there really wasn't such a thing as citizen participation other than just nodding your head and saying yes. But a lot of us neighborhood residents and activists worked with the city council and members of planning groups, and we got citizen participation to be a legitimate voice in affecting the decision making for neighborhoods. I see that being peeled back right now, and it really bothers me. And I think that's really happening with this process, with this project. The proposed design is out of scale. I think everybody knows that. It's so evident. I'm sorry I had to repeat it. Linden Hills is not Houston.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on the first appeal? Okay, we'll move to the second appeal. We'll give this group, again, one speaker who can speak a little bit longer if there's one representative who'd like to speak on the second appeal. Oh, on the first appeal. Come on up. Sure.
I was trying to make sure I wouldn't be too repetitive. My name is Laura Furster. I live at 2614 West 49th Street. I've grown up in the neighborhood and in Linden Hills for my whole life. I just wanted to say that everybody is here today doing their best and doing their jobs. The group who is in support of the appeal, including myself, I've been involved in these discussions and meetings since the first building was proposed on Linden Corner a couple years ago. I echo much of what has already been said. I helped participate on the brief that Connie has submitted, and I really hope sincerely that you will read it and that you will understand that people who are interested in what's going in on that corner are not unsophisticated lay people, though they may be. They have some very sincere concerns and arguments about appropriateness of the building height. Excuse me. And I just wanted to say and reiterate that people are concerned. They're not opposed to development. Things change. We have to adapt to change. But I think we all want to see change in an appropriate manner. I think in one of the last meetings that I attended in this front of this body, although there were different people, the comment was made from one of the members that there was some regret on her part that she didn't take it more into consideration, scope and scale, when the Uptown District was being built and built and built and built, and is now unrecognizable to what it was before all the development that went in there. I would just like to say, I think that is a legitimate concern for the people who live in this small area, in this community, that they would like to see something that's an appropriate scale that stays in character with what is currently there. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on the first appeal? Sure, come on up.
Hi, my name is Maria Nelson. I've been a Linden Hills resident for about 30 years. I've been involved with the first small area plan, which a tremendous amount of work, labor, hours, years of work went into developing that. And it's not really unlike the second small area plan. From my experience, the community has reiterated the same things over and over and over again. And it's not about just a building being built. Any building can be built in Linden Hills, but people come to Linden Hills and come to the Lakes area to get a certain feeling and a certain character. That building, which is fine for some places, maybe Bloomington, Eden Prairie, it's not indicative of Linden Hills. And the more we start having places like that, it's not going to be a node, this little jewel where people can come. That makes money for the city. So there are so many people that would build in that area, and this developer could build something that is appropriate. The frustrating part is that we put so much work into it. We're told by the city to do all this work. We want to hear your voices. I mean, I did so much work. I was given the Minneapolis Award in 1992 by Sharon Sells-Belton. There's so many people that have put so much work, and we believe our representatives, and we were told, do this work. This is how you get protection. This is how you don't have to repeat it over and over again. So we did that again. And if you look at our small area plan, I don't see how this building is in compliance with not one line of it. I mean, I believe the first floor store is like the size of an Apple store, 19 feet tall. And maybe that's changed now. But the storefronts are more like 12 feet tall. And so it's not just about, okay, we've got to get a building there. This isn't a distressed area that we just desperately need something in there right now. I mean, what you guys decide to do is the future of our city.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on the first appeal? Okay, we'll move to the second group. And so would one representative please come up to start that piece?
Hi. Larry Levercombe, 4316 Upton Avenue. Thank you for this opportunity to talk to you. So for 10 years, I was the zoning committee chair of Linden Hills, and I chaired all the meetings. And so what I want to do today is talk for a few minutes and tell you the way I see it. I'm not really representing anyone. That said, I was on that zoning committee. I chaired the zoning committee. I was on the small area plan steering committee. And So I've experienced all that. And I want to thank, Constance and Grant and Walt and Kristen, because it really has been a long, hard time. We've been working hard, and I feel like people in city have been working hard. And so I want to call them out for working so hard, for no money. So 3 weeks ago, I spoke to the Planning Commission, and I kind of spoke about democracy. And, the important thing that I said that day was that democracy doesn't work when the people are lied to. And I kind of feel like what I want to say today is there are certainly a number of people who feel like the process didn't work as well as they wanted it to. And I think that I'd like to know more about why that is and what happened, because I was in the middle of it. And I felt like, well, let me say this, because I feel like what I'm bringing today is what I hope is a collaborative thing. And, but I wasn't long ago on this other team. We were all together, and they feel really lousy, and I feel like, oh man, well, okay, let's keep going. So all I'm saying is that I think we could all, stand and learn about what went wrong with the small area plan experience. And today we have a different topic, and it's this appeal. So I want to quote from our appeal language very quickly. Our goal is to meet with the city and the developer and the developer's architect to address elements of the building design and its impact on the neighborhood. We believe the result of that collaboration will be a building that is significantly more appreciated by significantly more people. So since we filed that application, we've had community input. We called meetings, we did Facebook, we got, Jeffrey, how much money was sent in by individual checks? Over how much? So, no, but that was in addition to what we needed to raise to pay the thing, right? Okay, so here's what I feel like I want to report. Since we filed the appeal, we've had really great conversations with the Gasson Group, and we feel like there's a lot at stake for a lot of people, and everybody wins if everybody wins, like I said. And so let me talk about the talks with them. We met with them, 7 of us, and we talked about their design, and we talked about what we wanted. And, let me read a couple sentences here. Granted, there were things that we wanted that Linden Hills wanted. There were stuff that we wanted that we didn't come close to getting. And there are elements of this building, this modern design, that people think doesn't fit into Linden Hills. I can understand that argument. I feel like it's, worth talking about. I honestly feel like this building fits better in Hong Kong than Eden Prairie. But I kind of feel like, this building announces itself. And that's what they want to do. And I think that, you can make that cool if it also works as well as that can work in the group, in the community. So, like I said, I don't even know if I said this. I'm not speaking for the community. I'm just speaking for myself right now. But our experience is that this developer has been willing to listen and been willing to negotiate and talk and spend money. And I think that is great. And we met with him on a Monday, and on Tuesday, we got new renderings from his architect, and I responded by email, and Clark called me, and we talked for 20 minutes, and then the architect sent me a second new set of renderings that, changed what I feel like is one of the things about the look that has been difficult for people. The modern, really high contrasty black-white is getting this kind of red brick feeling without being a red brick building. And so I kind of feel like that's been a plus as far as we have been able to figure out so far. So we're collaborating, and what I want to jump to right this moment is everything that Constance and Walt were talking about, because we have a small area plan right now that is useful, but it's problematic. And I feel like it would be great to figure that out. You know, we have a city that's already announced meetings that there's going to be potential upzoning efforts. You know, you could say the city is poised to upzone certain Linden Hills parcels from C1 to C2, and we want to track with that. So what I want to say this is that, you know, we want a good seat at the table when the discussions begin. You know, we're engaged. I think the argument that we're not obstructionist when it comes to developments in our own neighborhood is fair. We are progressive, we're sophisticated, we're conscious around what works in a walkable, green, more densely populated 21st century community. You know, Minneapolis green community. So back to this building, and I'm working together. Like I said, we've made great progress. And I think these developers want to build something here that the people like. You know, there's really one thing that I feel like our group and they are talking about, and that is first floor ceiling height. And he's already said, I'll go 1. And I'm talking for me. I'd be feeling like 2 feet, Carl, or Clark, and let's do it. You know, I kind of feel like let's get this cool building built in a group feeling and, you know, do our best to move into the new century. You know, we want a pedestrian experience, and we feel like this thing right above us is, you know, I don't know what the virtual perceived height is, 15 feet, but bringing that a little closer, I think, feels better to the pedestrian and to the community that they are. I mean, my sense, I want to speak also very briefly about why I like this building, because I kind of feel like it's, you know, we have a group that says 3, not 4. And I'll tell you what I like about this building. One thing is that the old Dwyer building was like this long, and this one is like this long. And so I think that's better.
Mr. Lewis, could you finish with
Moving
some
on.
final
Sorry,
thoughts?
I hate to be wasting everybody's time here. So yeah, okay. So I think that speaking again for myself and not for the group, I kind of feel like we're heading towards something that's better than where we were heading not very long ago. And I'm glad to hear that. And let's see, do I have anything left? Jeffrey's going to speak next.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on the second appeal? Come on up, state your name and address for the record. And we'll resume the 2-minute time frame.
Yes, good afternoon. Good morning, excuse me. My name is Jeffrey Magnuson. I've been a resident of Linden Hills since 1990. I live at 3010 West 43rd Street. I am a practicing architect. I'm going to speak to the height issue because the height is one of the very big concerns that I have about this building. What can be done about this? Staff in their staff report has indicated on 2 occasions, staff encourages the applicant to reduce the height of the first floor below 19 feet. I totally agree with staff. I feel that 19 feet in this building is excessive. And why do I feel that? Is because I feel Linden Hills is a neighborhood with retail and commercial areas with pedestrian-friendly, moderate first floor ceiling heights. I have personally done a survey with my tape measure and found ceiling heights in the first floor retail shops vary, but they're in the range of 12 to 12 foot 6 inches height. And that includes clear height. That would include lighting. That also includes ductwork. That is why I feel the 19-foot proposed floor height should be reduced to a maximum of 16 feet. 12 feet to the ceiling, not 14 as the architects have talked about. And that would leave 4 feet for structure and acoustical separation. At 16 feet, the building would be reduced in height from 53 to 50 foot high. Now, how to get this done? I feel there needs to be some type of official language in the public record, because having the planning staff encourage the height reduction does not obligate the developer to do anything. I urge you, P&Z members, in your written narrative for this appeal to call upon the developer and architect to reduce the height on the first floor to a maximum of 16 feet as one way to reduce the building ceiling height, total building height. And that is all I have. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Nope.
No?
Would anyone else like to speak? Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet? Is there anyone else who would like to speak who hasn't spoken? Come on up.
Madam Chair, if I'm clear, we going through the list of speakers at this point? Or just on this appeal, the second appeal?
We ended up not going in the order. So if anyone would like to speak, just come on up, state your name and address for the record, and it will be part of the full public record. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the council, my name is John Pacheco, and I live on 3900 Upton Avenue South. I understand the importance of this node, and as most of you in your districts have a node where you have four corners and they're very personable to everyone. I cross this node constantly. My daughter goes to school on 45th and Upton. I'm on 39th and Upton. And we spend a lot of time there. I choose to shop at that Ace Hardware. It costs me a little more, but it's better than going to the Home Depot. And I think this is an important discussion to have. And I really, actually, to my opinion, I commend the staff and the developer for working hard on this project. It's quite different than what was proposed before. I think each of these nodes have a value in the sense that it takes all of us to support them. It takes homeowners, it takes rental, it takes commercials. And I think the project as presented does that. I think they bring together all of those elements. I think it's very helpful to the community. And what fears me the most, though, about the project is not the project itself, is that there's nothing after this. I mean, this piece of property has been sitting there with the cyclone fence on it now for a couple of years, and there's no developers beating down our door to put something else in there, and we'll be back again next year and the year after. So I think we have a viable project here that complies with what has been stated, has the necessary requirements, that complies with the movement of the property, even that little pocket park. It may not seem significant to folks, but that's an important element that had a little piano, and my daughters would come and play that thing. And I think that there are some elements here, and I think just to speak against it here doesn't do anyone good. I understand some of the points, but if I walk from my house on 39th to 44th in Upton, I pass old Victorian houses like mine. I pass craftsman houses, but I also pass these very modern houses that are built by elevation, like almost every other block. And so the neighborhood is changing. And just to comply to an old view of what it was is not acceptable. I think right now we have a great piece of property. We have a developer willing to, they have a developers working with the neighborhood, working with staff, and I urge your support of the project itself.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Come on up, state your name and address for the record.
Good morning. My name is Ashok Darwal. I live at 4548 Vincent Avenue South. I'm going to speak to supporting the project from a couple of perspectives. One is as a longtime resident there for 16 years. I have seen Linden Hills, actually, I think the energy and the excitement has actually gone down of the downtown area. There's many vacancies from a business perspective, more so than I've ever seen. The attraction for other people from coming outside is not there. There's nothing that's super attractive compared to 50th and France and other areas, Excelsior and Grand. So I think as a resident, to have a local developer that has proven to not only work with this group of people here, but also in projects that exist, the walkway and the Edgewater that I've seen very closely, those are very good properties. So I think we're actually lucky to have a local developer, a local ownership versus an outside group to come in and really try to take charge of understanding this. Obviously, there's economics behind it, right? So that's why they need to do what they need to do that. I'll switch gears as a local business owner who owns the Yoga Fits in town. I personally was surprised that they would come even down from 15 feet to 14 feet because our studios are all 15 feet high. So as a tenant, there's a lot of things that this building is doing that's very attractive to me as a business owner that I would actually want to go into those spaces. You start making that building shorter, less dense, less apartments, the whole rental from a retail perspective gets less attractive and thus brings in less people to come in. So from a business perspective, I think what they're doing is good to get really good retail tenants to come in. And I was involved in the prior project as well and helped redesign the entire floor plan for them with retail in mind. So I think to get the energy that Linden Hills used to have a long time ago, we need this building and the density it has to attract the retailers and people that are willing to pay for those units.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak?
Hi, my name is David Higgins. I live on 2700 West 44th Street in Linden Hills. I've lived in Linden Hills since 2005. And I'm just here as a concerned resident, as many of us are. And I've seen, since 2005, I've seen good change in the neighborhood. And I think, I support development, but I support respectful development. And I'm thankful that the developer is willing to meet with us and incorporate some of our wishes and be open to listening and negotiating changes. I think my biggest concern is, with this property, it's a very big focal point. So it's a very important corner in the Linden Hills neighborhood, the main street there, and it's what you see when you come in, and it's what you see when you go out. So that's why this project is so important to us in the neighborhood. Also, just in regards to the retail, I would hope the retail would be something that would stay true to the neighborhood, small business, family-owned, independent. It would really hurt me to see a CVS pharmacy or something go in there. And finally, with this whole third floor, fourth floor cup possible change, I would like to just reiterate, with all the work that we put in a small area plan, I think it's very important for for the neighborhood to be involved in that. We don't want to have to keep coming back and back and back for every project that's going to be done in the neighborhood. And I really hope that the council will consider us as a neighborhood and be willing to negotiate with us in the future and not have to keep doing this over and over and over again. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Anyone else?
I'm speaking to both appeals. My name is Sarah Lynn Romanishin, and I live at 22nd and Aldrich South. I'm here because the decisions made for one corner of our city affect the whole city. The rules of the game have changed. Everyone in this room knows that they have changed. Everyone live streaming and watching this video later will know that the rules have changed. The rules have changed in the back rooms at city departments like CPED and in this chamber. They have changed without the input, full awareness, and the permission of the majority of the people in this city. The rules of the game have changed so much that it is no longer a game. I support these two appeals because they are the will of the people. The question before you today is about an appeal regarding a development. The choices you make today are about much more. Will you uphold the appeals and deny the CUP, variances, and site plan review for 4364 Upton and listen to the heartfelt pleas of the people standing before you? Or will you vote to uphold an agenda not approved by the citizens of this city? I ask that you choose to uphold the appeals. The public stands before you, telling you what we want, what we need, and this is our city, our home. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Come on up. State your name and address for the record.
My name is Glenn Rank, and I live at 3020 West 43rd Street, right on Xerxes and 43rd Street, a couple of blocks down from the proposed development. I was at the meeting a week and a half ago where we discussed this particular appeal. I think the appeals are interrelated. I think they're talking about the same thing in a lot of ways. I think the consensus at that meeting was that this building that is proposed does not meet the plan and is not what the neighbors in Linden Hills are looking for or fit into Linden Hills. And we're talking about a legacy building. This is probably the most prominent intersection in the community, in the small community there. And we're talking about a building that's going to be there for a long, long time and is going to help identify what exactly that is. So whatever is approved and whatever goes in there is going to have a large impact on the neighborhood. It seems obvious to me at this point in time that the people in the neighborhood are not satisfied with what's going in there now. I would think it would seem obvious to you at this point in time that the people in the neighborhood are not satisfied with what's going in there now. I commend Larry for working with the developer. I think that's great. I don't know that the changes they're proposing come even close to what the neighbors are looking for or what would actually fit into that neighborhood and create something that will work in that neighborhood. I would say over and above anything else, I mean, this is a historic neighborhood and we're talking about the most prominent corner there. I don't think that this is not the east side of Detroit. We're not going to have to look forever to find a development there. And of course, any developer is going to try to put something in that they believe is going to make the most money for them on. But if I look at this closely, what I see is it can be improved on a ton. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Anyone else? We're just going to have each person speak one time in order to have time.
By law to speak on the second appeal, which is separate from the one that I spoke on previously.
Sure. We can have our city attorney speak to the public hearings rules.
Madam Chair and committee members, I believe it would be within the chair's discretion to limit the testimony as the appeals are on the same subject matter.
Thank you. Would anyone else who hasn't spoken like to speak?
I would ask
anyone else?
Speaking, I have a new topic. It's not repeating anything that anybody.
And we've had a significant amount of testimony about this item, and I'm going to close the public hearing unless anyone else who hasn't spoken would like to speak.
I'm hoping that the two appellants can just have one last little moment.
Oh, we have had lots of moments of testimony, so I'm going to close the public hearing. I'm going to close the public hearing. We appreciate the comments that we have heard and have given a significant amount of time for public testimony. I have closed the public hearing. And Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Obviously, a lot of attention has been put to this on all party sides. We do have some conditions that were designed to address this through the staff work and through the Planning Commission. I wish to move to further refine those conditions to get the project closer to the different parties' discussion points. And as you have before you, I will move to deny the appeals to approve the staff recommendations to adopt the conditional use permit to increase the maximum allowed height from the permitted 3 stories to the 42 feet 4 stories to 4 feet 11 inches, subject to the following amended conditions. And those conditions stand from the Planning Commission. However, I strike condition number 2 and I add a condition 4 that reads the first floor may not exceed 18 feet in height.
Okay, Councilmember Reich has moved to deny the appeals with the conditions stated in the item before us. Does anyone have any discussion? Seeing none, all those in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? That carries. We do have one more item on our agenda today, which is a review of last year's amendments to our 1 to 4 unit residential buildings. I will have staff present that item, think Councilmember Palmisano will be joining us for this discussion as the author of that change.
I'd like to publicly thank Elaine for hard work. Thank you, Chair Bender and committee members. So a year ago, this committee and the City Council adopted a comprehensive set of zoning code changes addressing lower density residential tear down and infill development. This is quite literally a one-year update, as although the council took action in August, the regulations took effect October 1st of 2014, exactly 1 year ago today. In the spring of 2014, CPED had convened a cross-department staff team to look at ordinance changes addressing tear downs and new construction. Those revisions were drafted relatively quickly, but in conjunction with a significant amount of engagement with the community, with various staff departments, and as well as architects and builders. Ultimately, the City Planning Commission public hearing resulted in, my recollection, only one person from the public expressing concerns about the regulations that were brought forward at that point. I think entering the process, we would have not anticipated that level of consensus given the range of issues that had been brought forward. On the final page of your memo about this issue, there are a list of, I think, 15 or 16 different topics that were addressed as part of the amendment, which included height, setbacks, lot coverage, impervious surface, and overall floor area. I'll go briefly through some of the data and observations about the past year of implementation. If it would be possible to zoom out on that a little bit. So this is a map of the 1 to 4 unit activity that has taken place since October 1st of 2014. And if we get zoomed out, we'll see some sort of clusters of where this activity is taking place. There's continues to be a lot of tear down and new construction activity in Ward 13 in particular. Ward 12 is seeing a significant amount of new home construction. And you're also seeing a fair number of new homes being constructed in the northern part of Ward 5 and in the southern part of Ward 4.
Just to note, it actually didn't zoom out, so we can't see the 13th ward in particular that you're referencing.
There's a little bit bigger picture. And just to describe this map a little bit, the sort of green and black dots are situations where the rebuild followed the tear down within about a year. The yellow dots are new homes that have been built on lots that were vacant a little bit longer than a year, apparently. And then the red X's, just for the sake of clarification, are demolitions of all types, which could be commercial uses on corridors to make way for larger redevelopments, for example. Those are not just 1 to 4 unit tear downs. In terms of building height and floor area, just some of the data that we've compiled of homes that have been built since that time. Somewhat counterintuitively, we've actually seen a slight increase in the average height of new homes during that time, and a slight increase in the average floor area. There's a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison in the floor area, though, in that the new regulations require that the entire, when you have an attached garage, the entire garage is counted as floor area, whereas that was not the case previously. In terms of height, when we drafted the new regulations, we had found that in the years leading up to the amendment, about 7 or 8% of the homes that were being constructed would not have complied with the new regulations. So to a large degree, there were these outliers that were generating a lot of concerns from neighboring property owners in particular. So we've essentially addressed those outliers. Those outliers are no longer being constructed. Again, about 7 or 8% of the homes that were being constructed just simply cannot be constructed under today's more strict rules. We, in our site plan review regulations, included an incentive to address the issue of taller homes being built in an area where there's a shorter context. We give points essentially for being within a half story of the predominant context in an area. We're still sort of monitoring how well that provision is working and whether there's a way to get at those disparate heights that we're seeing in some cases are relatively jarring. We did make a change, a relatively modest change earlier this year. There was a provision that we discovered that we brought forward a recommendation that turned out to be a little too strict, and that addressed the issue of how much of a basement can extend above grade before it has to be counted as floor area. We had dropped that measurement down from 4 feet to 2.5 feet. We were finding that there are actually quite a few existing homes, century-old homes, that don't comply with that standard. So when people were going to construct additions, they were actually being told, "We're sorry, your existing home is over the allowed FAR, so you can't even do an addition." So we've slightly amended that back up to a 3.5-foot level, where how far a basement can extend above grade before it has to be counted as floor area. Also, in terms of contextual issues, we wanted to make sure we weren't drafting regulations that prevented people from constructing homes that matched a character that included relatively large homes on relatively small lots. So you may recall that there's an exception that comes into play for both height and floor area when the context of the area includes floor area ratio over 0.5 or height over the 33 feet. That is now the maximum. This is a picture that has been going around on Twitter a little bit. It's actually a new construction in Ward 10. Want to be very clear that that's not a new single-family home. This is actually a 4-unit building that's being constructed in a higher density zoning district. I think people were a little surprised by the height of that building. Just to be clear, that's not a new single-family home. That could not be constructed in our lower density zoning districts. This is just a visual representation of the site plan review standards. Just to recall that the site plan review standards for new homes through 4-unit buildings are distinct and separate from the standards that apply to larger development projects, apartments, or mixed-use developments. So in addition to meeting sort of minimum zoning standards, a new project has to obtain at least 17 points off of this range of options. Some interesting things to note, since the new regulations were adopted in October, we're seeing homes taking advantage of a wider range of the points of the design features to meet their minimum point threshold. Previously, about 5 on average, 5 design features were being utilized to comply with the minimum number of points. We're seeing something closer to an average of 6 of these features being utilized to comply with the site plan review regulations now. The new regulations include a much greater emphasis on higher quality materials, and we have seen a corresponding increase in 83% of the homes that have been constructed or approved for zoning purposes since October 1st of 2014. They have utilized higher quality exterior building materials. That 83% compares to 70% previously. One interesting thing to note is that we drafted in an alternative compliance mechanism where if a project was unable to comply with the minimum number of points, there is a way to request an alternative to that. And to date, since October, we have not had a single request for alternative compliance. Projects have either come in the door having met the standards or were altered in a way that they could achieve the minimum threshold. So overall, our assessment is that the new regulations are working quite well. It was a relatively large collection of relatively small changes, I think, based on feedback from the staff who are implementing the ordinance, as well as people in the community and builders and architects. We think that we've struck a reasonable balance in the competing objectives that are present in teardowns and new construction in lower density districts. As noted in the memo for this item, we're looking for the council's feedback about a policy question related to CPED's analysis of new homes. The issue of substantial renovation or virtual teardowns continues to be a difficult one. We are working on a memorandum that will hopefully provide additional guidance to people who are engaging in substantial renovation to the extent that they're removing more than 60% of the structure. I think these photos are maybe a little dark, but a recent example is a property owner took this home and brought it down to that, essentially. In this case, it didn't come all the way down to the foundation, but all of the exterior materials were removed, which was not consistent with the plans that were approved by staff. And when this level of demolition takes place, we essentially say that whatever is built after that has to comply with today's regulations, both in terms of site plan review standards, as well as required yards. That has triggered at least several variances that have come forward to the Board of Adjustment. And staff has sort of struggled with how to address those variances. Recall that property owner has to show practical difficulty in making their case for a variance. Staff has often found that the practical difficulty has been the location of the existing foundation. And the Board of Adjustment has provided some feedback to us that perhaps there should be more than just the foundation as the unique quality that justifies the granting of a variance. Essentially, if that kind of variance becomes automatic, the thought is that it circumvents the intent of the regulations that in some cases required larger setbacks, particularly on wider lots. So we're looking for some feedback from the council on that particular policy question, but other than that, as stated, we think the regulations are being implemented pretty well.
Thank you. Are there questions for staff? Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate this update, and I guess this is more just a comment and maybe something then we can just take offline, but it seems like, you know, having the second most tear downs in the city, in my ward, that there's kind of two concerns. One is around the size and the fit of the new home into the neighborhood, but the other is really around the loss of our great housing stock. And it seems like a lot of times I look at these homes that are being requested permits to wreck them and to tear them down for these rebuilds. It seems like they're extremely dilapidated, ready to fall apart. It wouldn't economically make sense to fix them up. So I guess it's just feedback or a comment that I think it would be helpful if there was some way, and I don't know if there is an easy way, to better understand that and kind of address that concern by the community of, hey, what type of homes are these? Are we really seeing people buy a great in shape family home and just tear it down just for the land? Or is it really instances where it's not possible to rehabilitate? So that's just some feedback. No response needed.
Thank you.
Mr. Wickenberg, I was wondering, were these all single family homes in the analysis that you provided? And I just wondered if we're seeing any duplex, triplex, or fourplex new construction, and if so, how we know this is working or might work for those slightly different unit types.
Sure, Chair Bender. I don't have the specific numbers of single family versus 2 or 3 or 4 family. This map does include, and that analysis did include 2, 3, and 4 unit buildings as well. However, the vast majority, 90% or more of the projects that appear on that map are certainly single family. An argument could be made that the regulations are not a perfect fit for sort of 3 and 4 unit buildings. And also, as you know, we're quite restrictive in terms of where you can build duplexes in the city. Since the mid-90s, we've had a relatively large minimum lot area requirement for duplexes in our R2B district, which is our duplex district. I think the effect of that, however, has perhaps been mitigated a bit by the fact that we now allow accessory dwelling units. So on a 5,000 square foot lot in R2B, you can build and own or construct an accessory dwelling unit, either new or accessory to an existing structure. So I wonder if that makes it a little bit less urgent for us to re-examine those minimum lot area requirements in R2B if people do have a mechanism to get 2 units on those properties.
Thank you. I think that's an interesting point. I'm curious about this general policy topic area of 2, 3, and 4 unit buildings. And I think particularly in my ward, I was joking with Councilmember Palmisano that in her ward, people want to tear down smaller homes and build larger ones. But in my ward, I actually hear people say that the homes are too big for their needs and they want smaller green homes. So just to think a different housing market, a different part of town, a different historic fabric there. But I think there are parts of the city where some of the form is of much larger homes where these 2, 3, and 4 unit buildings might fit in really well with the character if there ever is a market for new construction in that space. So anyway, I think it's a future topic area. Councilmember Palmisano, did you want to talk about this foundation issue?
Sure, if I may, just have a couple comments about the analysis. First, I want to thank Jason Wittenberg for his work, not only on the presentation, but the analysis and on serving as the lead on this work over the last 18 months. That's been no small task. I'd also like to thank Brad Ellis, Joe Giant, and Andrew Friends for all of their help too. 1 year ago today, and Mr. Wittenberg is right, exactly 1 year ago today, the zoning infill text amendment for 1 to 4 units became effective, and that really marked a change in the way that we give permits to build and renovate homes across the city. Mr. Wittenberg's map shows approvals post October 1st. The reason why this might not map to your own notice of new development in your own ward is there were a number of proposals that came in right before that October 1st deadline where building didn't actually start until sometime late spring or this summer. So I actually experienced quite a bit more in my part of town than what you see on this map. And I know from driving through others that there's a lot more building development out there in the mostly single family residential space. The goal of these amendments were reasonable standards that improved outcomes for all Minneapolis neighborhoods and residents. And I think it's clear from the data that they've gathered that we've achieved that goal. While a negotiation also often means that both sides are a little bit dissatisfied, I do think these changes strike a healthy balance between the concerns of existing residents and the desires of homeowners. I think the results speak for themselves. New homes are taking up a smaller amount of impervious surface, and there's more room between them and their neighbors. A higher percentage of these homes have high quality exterior materials. I know that to be particularly important for some of the council members. A higher percentage of new homes are obtaining points for a large amount of window area on all sides of the structure. And although the bar was set much higher for tree preservation and planting, the same percentage of homes are achieving those points. I'd like it to be more. We'll continue efforts on that. So my great thanks to all of you as well as council members for participating in my efforts with expertise that you've brought from all of your areas that you represent. As Mr. Wittenberg mentioned and Chair Bender, I've worked on a motion that that I've constructed with Chair Bender to take a closer look at those foundations to say that that basically is not a practical difficulty when you're taking something down to the foundation of a house, that you don't necessarily get to keep those setbacks in the way that they would be evaluated for a variance. So I think that is what is before you, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm happy to move that staff direction that Councilmember Palmisano worked on with staff, which is to provide a higher level of scrutiny related to this issue that Mr. Wittenberg described, where the setbacks are impacted by the existing foundations. And this just clarifies how we intend to treat existing foundations and gives direction to the Board of Adjustment that the foundation should not be the only unique factor that leads to the conclusion that a property owner is faced with a practical difficulty. And again, this is to just clarify the intention of the original policy that we adopted. Any discussion on the staff direction? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. That carries. And that was our final item. We are adjourned. Thank you so much.